Joanna, can you tell us in one sentence what executive function skills are?
Yeah, well, I'll try, Dee. Executive function skills are the skills that allow us to get what we want done in life. It's a pretty broad statement. So I might add on an extra sentence.
Okay.
They're cognitive skills, thinking skills that allow us to be goal directed and set and work towards goals. So they comprise working memory, being able to hold short pieces information in your head while you manipulate it, being able to think flexibly, and to reduce your responses to distraction or inhibition control and self-regulation. So they're really important skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And why are they so important for children with hearing loss?
That's a really good question. They're really important for all children, but they're particularly important for us to be aware of as people who support and work with kids with hearing loss, because there is quite a bit of evidence now to show that these skills of working memory, thinking flexibly, and inhibition control are at risk for kids with hearing loss. And if we like to think, that some of the research describes the brain, because really what we're talking about is the brain in relation to hearing loss. So the brain is described as being in a connectome, or all the wires of the brain working together. And the information that you get if you have a hearing loss and you're using a cochlear implant or a hearing aid is not the same as if you have typical acoustic hearing. So that's not to say that we can't get amazing access through a cochlear implant or a hearing aid. It's just to say that the downstream effects, or what happens to the brain when the signal that's going in might not be as perfect as it would be if you have typical hearing. So that means, for example, kids with cochlear implants or hearing aids aren't overhearing as well as typically hearing kids do, because those devices don't allow for overhearing as well. Overhearing in distance or overhearing over distance is more challenging if you're wearing a device, and then listening in noise. So there's certain factors about listening with a hearing loss through a device that make it difficult to get the clearest and most consistent signal in. And so if we think of that, that model of a computer in the brain, what input goes in will affect the output. And then there's a kind of a circle effect of executive function skills. So we know that kids with hearing loss may be at risk for delayed or disordered executive function skill acquisition. But executive function skills really underpin communication and language. So you might have this almost vicious circle happening of the hearing loss affecting executive function skills, and executive function skills underpinning language, and so on. So we're interested in these because if we work on them early, we can really support children in those cognitive skill developments.
Yeah, so you said work on them early. Is there an age that executive function skills typically develop?
Yeah. So unlike if yes, there is, and it's different from the profile of sensory experience input. So we know a lot about hearing loss, and all of the parents with whom we work would know that early detection, early diagnosis, and early fitting happens super early for their children. So that sensory profile and that acquisition of the critical period is happening even before babies are born. So we know that the critical period for sensory information, including hearing, is from 0 to 7, but really 0 to 3. For executive function skills, babies aren't necessarily born with them. These are skills that happen through experience. So they start in in that mother or parent and baby dyad or interrelationship. So when a baby gurgles or smiles, a parent or a caregiver will look back and smile and interpret that very close to and forth or serve and return relationship. So those experiences of nurturing and pre-verbal communication are supporting executive function development, because really what that is regulating the baby's stress levels, keeping them calm, keeping them firmly attached. And attachment is that key piece of a baby knowing, well, I'm safe, I'm cared for. Whenever I do something, I'm getting a response, and that's going to encourage me to do another response. So it does happen early, and those foundations are being laid early. But the real critical period, where it takes off for children for executive function skills, is in the preschool period. So if you look at a graph of executive function development, it really takes a big steep increase between 3 and 6, and it plateaus a little bit, and then it goes up again at around 12, between 12 and 14, and then it kind of stabilizes. But really, executive function skills are thought to not fully develop until late, or actually early, what do you call it, mid-adulthood, so around 28, and that number has been revised upwards over the last few years.
So interesting. So tell me about the inspiration for the Shepherd Centre to develop the Ready Steady Think program for this age group, which is the 4 to 5-year-olds.
No, yeah, it's really interesting, and it's been probably about 4 years, and this is the thing. I think we can be very proud the fact that we've looked at research and we've got something into clinical practice in that time span, even though it feels like a long time for us. But on average, between a paper being published and practice being, that research being affected into practice, that takes about 17 years or so. So we're trying to look at what the research tells us and put something into practice early. So as with most things at the Shepherd Centre, we look at reviewing our outcomes. We look at our outcomes closely. We seek feedback from parents and teachers and kids themselves about their outcomes, and we kept hearing and we kept seeing in some of the kids as they got older that some parts, even though we'd get them to a level where they were age appropriate in their spoken language skills, so they'd have great vocabulary and their speech was clear. There would be things about their social interactions that would be difficult, or certain things about their behaviour, so difficulty with impulse control, or reports of lots of fatigue at the end of the day when they start school, or things that suggested that even though speech and language was developing well, that was perhaps coming at a cost for some of these other skills that we're looking at. And we thought, oh, okay, so maybe there is something happening. And then looking into the research, lo and behold, yes, there is this theory that the brain is working really hard in the presence of a hearing loss to process speech and language, and then taking on all of that other information, such as social interaction cues, and learning how to not look at distractions, and improve and focus your attention, and not be too rigid in your thinking, because sometimes if you've got a hearing loss, for kids anyway, they really want things to be very predictable and done in a certain way, within a certain time frame, and not to change, because that uncertainty can be a bit threatening. So there was all these different things that didn't seem related until we started to think about it and join the threads together. We think, oh, okay, that's what this group of things are. Or the X factor, if you like. And then when you start looking into how important executive function skills are, and not just for kids with hearing loss, you start to realise that these are skills that are important for us all to consider. And certainly for me and you, Dee, too, I know we've all been thinking, oh yeah, my working memory is not great all the time, or maybe I don't have the best impulse control, or I have great impulse control when it comes to to Tim Tams, for example. But, oh my gosh, when I start watching my favourite TV show, I can't turn it off, or, that kind of thing. So, these aren't
Right. Such good
blanket.
examples for us to
Yeah.
think about as adults, but then help
Yeah.
us think about it for children of
Yep.
some of these areas that are complex
Correct. Yeah.
for them
So,
to really pick up and learn, hey?
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and there's no wizardry or magic to thinking about these skills. It's just like, sometimes just getting stuff done is hard, and we've got to think about the circumstances and how emotions play into that as well.
And I know that these activities that you do in the Ready Steady Think program really help with breaking all that down so that the kids can learn some of these really complex skills but in simple ways. Can you tell us more about how families can do that and help their children with the different components of executive function at home?
Yeah. Look, I think first of all, it's good to know that while we talk about the separate components, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and the inhibition control, um, in children, it's really difficult to separate them out. We can do assessments, and they'll say, oh, they've got strengths and weaknesses in certain areas, but in terms of intervention, it doesn't make much sense, and there's no evidence to say that passing off those different components and working on them separately is useful. So that's why we have these games. So we might say, oh, look, this game highlights inhibition, but it might also be working on flexibility and attention and other skills. So, and I suppose, the reason that we created a brand new course is because you can't go and find something. You might be able to get an app that says, oh, this is great for working memory. But unfortunately, while that app might be fun and engaging, it might make you better at doing that task on the app, but it's probably not going to generalize into being able to remember, more instructions from the teacher at school, or help with your reading skills, because working memory and phonological awareness for reading, they're interlinked as well. So I suppose don't try and separate them out, because you don't need to. And in
So
terms of
it's not like one particular activity is for flexibility and cognitive flexibility and another activity is for impulse control.
not
Actually, all
necessarily.
of these things, they highlight one thing, but they all really mesh together.
Yeah. So I think looking at the parent info sheets and looking at some of the carryover activities, that will give you ideas. But even simple things like daily routines that kids might find difficult. So, if getting to bed and brushing your teeth is the thing that you dread, because you say, okay, go Johnny, brush your teeth, and 10 minutes later you go in and he's playing with Lego, then that's a not that he can't do it, because you've seen him brush his teeth, or he won't do it. It's just that whatever happens when he gets to his room, he gets a bit distracted. So breaking things down and going, okay, well, I'll help you with this bit, and you're going to do the next bit on your own, and I'll come and check on you. So rather than just giving them one instruction, chunking it out for them can be really helpful. Doing daily routines and letting them do them on their own in a safe way. So if you're doing too much for your child, it might be time to pull back on a few of those steps. Letting them try and sometimes fail is really important for kids, so they know that it's okay. And if you don't try and fail at things, then you're not going to problem solve. You're not going to work out how to try and do things differently, or reflect and analyze, which starts to move into the higher level executive function skills. Planning, reasoning, goal setting, and all of that kind of stuff. So I would look at daily routines as a start. Old-fashioned games, red light, blue light, red light, green light, duck, duck, goose, hopscotch, games that they used to play or may still play in party games. So pass the parcel. Not everyone should get a prize, because that's kind of, you've got to learn that it's okay to just wait till the end. Taking your turn. Role play. So if you know some really good stories, and everyone in the family takes a character, and you plan that play out and you act it out. So look to the daily routines, the ones that aren't working that well, and seeing if you can break it down. See if there's some incidental games that you can play. These aren't the kind of skills that require a lot of kind of extra stuff. You don't need to buy stuff. You don't need to download stuff. And certainly we would like to get some feedback from parents about ideas that they have as well. So maybe we'll get the opportunity to get some feedback from parents as well at some point.
Yeah, sounds awesome. So really it's your advice for parents is that you can do it in your daily routine, but looking at different ways to do that, as well as thinking about some of the different interactive games with another person, whether it's a sibling, a peer, or yourselves as parents or grandparents or aunties and uncles, to have those interactive games with kids for them
Yeah,
to start to learn some of these challenges that come across, and be okay with the challenge. That
yeah.
if they don't like to lose, and I'll put my hand up and say I'm one of those people, and I had to learn some of those skills around it's okay, and learning to lose and learning to win gracefully is equally
Mm-hmm.
important in some of those games that you might play with kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that it's okay. So you might do a bit of sabotage as well. So, what happens if you don't have the right equipment to play a game, or if leave a few things out of the routine and get kids to think about, um, what are we going to do if we don't have this, or, so really
Mhm.
getting them to apply their thinking. And that's why this is called Ready, Steady, Think, because it's getting things not just to go through the motions and do things out of habit, but to stop and realize that they have a choice about how to behave. And if we help support that decision making, we will help them apply thinking rather than just reacting to situations, and retrain their brains.
So, my final question for you, Joanna, is do we stop learning executive function skills? Is there an age that we stop learning executive function skills?
Oh, no, no. Look, you will see charts where it kind of plateaus at around 28 or so. But no, look, we don't ever stop learning anything. Our brains are plastic. There's certainly critical periods that we know about for certain things, but we learn all the time. And the wonderful thing about executive function skills are the kids that have to gain the most, have the most to gain, will gain the most. So um, the evidence supports that working on these skills does yield benefit, and can have impact on lifelong outcomes. So, no, keep learning, keep being curious, and keep thinking.
I love that. Keep
Mm,
learning, keep being curious, and keep thinking, and keep doing that with your children and the children around you. And Ready Steady Think program and activities just really support you in different ways to do that. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing your
mhm.
insights into Ready Steady Think, Joanna.
Thanks, Dee.
Amazing.
My pleasure.